You are watching the Story and History channel. Today, we will discuss some unknown events of the Titanic ship, which have never been revealed to anyone. It was the night of April 14th, 1912. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly, dark and silent, reflecting a million stars above. Titanic, the largest ship ever built, proudly claimed to be unsinkable. The decks glittered with lights, the grand halls echoed with laughter, and the air smelled of champagne and expensive perfume. In first class, men and women dressed in the finest gowns and suits danced and dined, celebrating the marvel of human achievement. But far below, hidden in the steerage and lower decks, a very different story was unfolding. Black passengers, Caribbean immigrants, and African American crew members walked the narrow corridors of the ship. Their journey was not about luxury, it was about hope. They came seeking a better life, freedom, and opportunity in a new land. For them, Titanic represented a dream, fragile and shining. Few knew their names, their faces, or their hopes. They were the invisible souls of Titanic, the ones history often forgot. Yet, in the heart of the Atlantic, their stories would clash with destiny, and their courage would shine in the shadows of tragedy. As the ship sailed smoothly under a silver moon, children played quietly in cramped cabins, parents whispered prayers, and crew members hustled to serve, clean, and maintain order. Each step, each glance, carried anticipation and anxiety. They did not yet know that this night, which began with promise, would end in disaster. Titanic's grandeur above deck contrasted sharply with the struggle below. The disparity was not only in cabins, but in fate. While the elite dined, many below ate simple meals, whispered to loved ones, and clutched tickets that represented the thin line between survival and oblivion. Who were they? The black passengers aboard Titanic were few, often overlooked in official records. They came primarily from the Caribbean, Barbados, Jamaica, and other islands, seeking jobs, family reunions, or a fresh start in the United States. Many served as stewards, cooks, or deckhands. Some were traveling in steerage with nothing but a small bag, a letter, and a heart full of hope. Imagine Samuel, a young man from Kingston, Jamaica. He had left his family behind, clutching a letter from his sister promising to meet him in New York. His dreams were simple: find honest work, send money home, and one day build a home of his own. He had no idea how fate would test him. Or think of Mary, a mother from Barbados, traveling with her 2 children. She had saved for years to secure passage on Titanic, believing that America held the promise of freedom and security. She carried a small bundle of clothes, some food, and an unwavering hope that her children would grow up safe and educated. Life for these passengers was not easy. The lower decks were crowded and poorly ventilated. Meals were simple and repetitive. Privacy was almost non-existent. Despite these hardships, they remained cheerful, telling stories, singing songs from home, and sharing dreams of a future that awaited them across the Atlantic. Crew members, many of them black, faced a different challenge. They worked tirelessly, often overlooked, handling the needs of passengers above deck while being aware that in an emergency, their chances of survival were slim. Their hands prepared meals, cleaned rooms, and carried luggage, Yet history rarely recorded their courage or dedication. These were people with names, families, and ambitions. They were no less human than the wealthy passengers above. Yet, in the narratives that history celebrated, their stories were mostly invisible, buried beneath tales of heroism and luxury.
On April 10, 1912, Titanic left Southampton, England. The excitement was palpable. First-class passengers waved from the grand decks, photographers captured smiles, and reporters chronicled the unsinkable ship's maiden voyage. Below deck, black passengers adjusted to the ship's life. The smell of the ocean mingled with cooking food, laughter, and chatter. Children ran along narrow hallways, clinging to parents' hands, while adults navigated the crowded spaces, careful not to bump into others. Some wrote letters, some whispered prayers, some simply stared at the ceiling, imagining the life that awaited them. Imagine Joseph, a young steward from Trinidad, carrying trays of tea to first-class cabins. He smiled politely at the passengers above, hiding his own exhaustion. Each step on the polished decks reminded him of the inequality that structured the ship. The wealth and comfort above were a stark contrast to the narrow, dimly lit corridors below. Despite these conditions, hope remained a constant companion. Songs were sung quietly, stories shared, and friendships formed. They celebrated small victories: a warm meal, a sunny afternoon on the deck, the kindness of a fellow traveler. But the Atlantic was vast and unpredictable. Beneath the calm waters lay hidden danger. No one could foresee the iceberg that would bring this voyage to an unimaginable halt. Yet the passengers continued to dream, unaware that their courage would soon be tested beyond imagination.
Life in steerage and lower decks was difficult. Cabins were cramped, with narrow beds stacked together. Ventilation was poor, and the smell of the sea mixed with the sweat and oil of so many people living in close quarters. Black immigrants found themselves trapped in these conditions, yet they built a small sense of community. They shared meals, stories, and sometimes even dreams. Women comforted children, men offered assistance, and friendships blossomed amid hardship. A family from Barbados, father, mother, and 2 children, spent nights telling stories about home. They imagined New York as a place of opportunity, where children could play freely and grow without fear. Their laughter echoed faintly through the corridors, a defiance against the looming tragedy. Crew members worked tirelessly. They were the invisible gears of Titanic, making sure the grand ship ran smoothly. Many were black men and women, performing dangerous jobs with skill and dedication. They cleaned cabins, served passengers, and maintained the engine rooms. Yet, in history books, their names were rarely remembered. For these passengers, dreams and reality were intertwined. The lower decks, though crowded and harsh, were full of life. Children played quietly, parents held on to letters, and young men planned their future. They imagined reaching New York, finding jobs, and sending money back home. Every heartbeat carried hope, but destiny had a darker plan.
Late on the night of April 14, 1912, the unthinkable happened. Titanic struck an iceberg. The impact was sudden, jarring the passengers awake. The ship shuddered, and panic rippled through every deck. In the lower decks, the chaos was even more terrifying. Black passengers and crew members scrambled to understand what was happening. The narrow corridors became congested with frightened families. Many had never been at sea, and the fear in their eyes reflected the gravity of the moment.
Samuel from Kingston clutched his sister's letter, reading it one last time before rushing toward the stairs. Mary held her children tightly, whispering prayers for safety. Joseph, the young steward, guided passengers as best as he could, knowing that in an emergency, many might not survive. The cries of the wealthy passengers above mixed with the fear below. But the lower decks were more isolated. Lifeboats were limited, and social inequality meant that those in steerage had almost no priority. The water began to flood the lower compartments quickly. Passengers screamed, some fainted, others tried desperately to find an exit. Crew members worked frantically, trying to maintain calm and assist as many as possible. The freezing Atlantic water seeped into every corner, and the bitter cold made survival even more uncertain. Stories emerged of bravery and selflessness. Some passengers helped strangers, carried children through waist-deep water, and comforted the dying. Others clung to hope, believing that the mighty Titanic would somehow remain afloat. Yet, with each passing minute, the reality became undeniable. The ship was sinking. The struggle for survival. As the ship tilted and the water rose, passengers fought to reach the lifeboats. Above deck, women and children were prioritized, but for black passengers below, the struggle was far greater. Many were trapped, blocked by stairs, locked doors, and chaos. Joseph, the steward, helped several families climb the slippery stairs to the boat deck. Samuel and Mary clung to each other, finding strength in their bond. Every step was a fight against death, every breath a precious gift. Some families were separated. Children cried for parents, husbands searched desperately for wives, and friends held hands, praying that they would survive together. The Atlantic was merciless, the cold water a constant threat. Despite these obstacles, courage shone. A group of Caribbean men managed to lift an elderly woman into a lifeboat. A mother protected her children by keeping them close to her chest. Even those who could not reach safety displayed bravery, comforting each other and refusing to give in to despair. The screams, the prayers, and the silence of the doomed created an atmosphere of surreal horror. For black passengers, the struggle was compounded by invisibility. Few crew members prioritized their rescue, and lifeboat access was limited. Yet they persisted, embodying a quiet courage that would later be recognized only in fragments of diaries and survivor accounts. But what happened that day? By morning, Titanic had vanished beneath the icy waters. Survivors clung to lifeboats, shivering and exhausted. Among them were a few black passengers who had managed to escape, their faces etched with trauma and sorrow. Mary and her children were rescued by a lifeboat, but their journey had changed them forever. Samuel survived, but he lost friends and family in the tragedy. Joseph, the steward, survived after helping dozens reach the boats, his hands raw, his heart heavy with grief. These survivors faced a new challenge, rebuilding life in a world that often ignored their struggle. Newspapers celebrated the heroism of certain passengers, yet the stories of black immigrants and crew members were rarely mentioned. They returned to families, sought work, and carried the memory of Titanic in every heartbeat. Legacy, remembering the unseen. Today, Titanic is remembered for its grandeur, the iceberg and heroic tales. But the hidden stories of Black passengers, Caribbean immigrants, and invisible crew members remain largely untold. Their courage, hope, and resilience deserve recognition. They were ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances, fighting for survival and dignity. Their letters, diaries, and whispered prayers tell us that history is not only about wealth and fame, but about human endurance in the face of unimaginable adversity. As we recall Titanic, let us remember the unseen, honor the forgotten, and understand that the true story lies not just in the ship, but in the lives it carried and the courage it revealed.